Success, it has been said, is not the absence of failure, but going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm. My name is BJ Grimillion, and I am the host of the Rush to Fail podcast. This podcast was created to highlight and learn from others who have turned their failures into success in hopes that it will both inspire and encourage others to push through their trials and to not be afraid of short-term failure. Our mantra on this show is to fail often, fail forward, and rush to fail.
Welcome to the Rush to Fail podcast. I am your host, BJ Grimillion, and man, it has been a minute since I've been on. In fact, I think it's been almost 3 months, which that's not good. For someone that preaches consistency, that is inexcusable. So I am going to be better moving forward. And yeah, it's just been quite the last quarter for our business in a very positive way, to be honest. These are all good things, a lot to catch up on. But what I wanted to do, honestly, today was just hop on and share. There's been a handful of things that have been on my mind. And what I try to do on a consistent basis is about every week, sometimes every other week, I will put out a blog or a post on our email distribution list, and it will just be on whatever topic is on our mind. And a lot of times, obviously, it'll be real estate related. Sometimes it's not, though. Sometimes it's more just life lessons learned the hard way. This podcast is about failure. It is something I'm passionate about. I'm a huge believer in just diving in and trying to figure things out as you go. And passionately that the most successful people and those that end up being those movers and shakers of the world that, you know, create these massive businesses or do incredible things like the Steve Jobs of the world and the Elon Musks and the Bill Gates, all of these amazing entrepreneurs, they were willing to just go for it and try and figure it out. And I think my favorite slogan is the Just Do It by Nike, right? And Phil Knight is a great example. If you have not, by the way, read Shoe Dog, I absolutely recommend it. I've listened to it twice now. And every time I listen to those stories, I get so excited and just energized by people that are willing, again, just to put themselves out there. And I think that the older that I get, the more willing I am and the more comfortable that I've become, not knowing everything and being okay with that, just being okay with learning on the fly, right? So I know I've talked to many people about the name of the podcast being Rush to Fail. And a lot of people are like, man, that's kind of an odd name. And I agree, it's different. People, I think, would look at that as man, like you just want to fail. Like, why would I rush to fail? And so maybe that gives you a little bit more context. Like I'm actually just a believer in fail until you figure it out kind of a thing versus, you know, sit there analysis and getting the paralysis going on. So anyways, that is a big reason why I started the podcast. So today I wanted to tackle 3 topics roughly. And of course I might go on some tangents here and there, but 3 really big lessons learned this past quarter that have really sunk in. And I've had some time to chew on it and think about and, you know, what I wanted to talk about and share. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and just dive right into the very first topic, which I titled it, and I did an article about this. I think it was about 3 weeks ago. The title being Facts Over Feelings. This is something I'm passionate about because I am kind of an interesting case study in that in business am all business, right? Like I really can enjoy and stay in the lane of just like cold hard facts. And I don't care about emotions. I don't care how it makes you feel. Like I just want to like get really zoned in on, you know, business, right? Get down to business. Now, on the flip side of that though, I can literally cry at any commercial at any given moment, right? Like, I mean, just you tell me a story and it's hard for me not to get teared up if there's any type of emotion involved. So it's interesting because my wife and kids make fun of me all the time because I am a crybaby. Like I can cry at the drop of a hat about things, but yet it's interesting because with business, I'm able to just separate, you know, the two fairly well, I would say. Obviously, I'm not perfect by any means. And there are times that is tested, when you get those calls, from angry people for whatever reason. It's hard not to match their energy and to go to that level. But yeah, so, I was thinking about facts over feelings. And this really came up because I think politics just is so ridiculous, you guys. Like it's crazy that it's always been a part of society. Politics has always been a thing. I'm sure with Adam and Eve, their kids, they probably didn't call it politicking at that time, but I mean, eventually you get to a point where you get a leader, and then you got the peons, and then, you got the soldiers and everything. And then they look to a leader, and then there's power struggles and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure when politics really took shape, but man, it's gotten ugly, right? Like we've had 2 assassination attempts on one of the candidates, and we've had 1 drop out. We've had, you get who knows how many ads every single day of, trashing the other candidate and this person that, so the interesting thread throughout politics is they know that if they appeal to your feelings, especially fear, then it works and it sells, right? Like that's why they keep putting money into it. And so if they can sell you one, if Donald Trump were to be elected, he would become a dictator. He would become Hitler, Stalin, you name it. He's going to be this horrible person. He's going to ruin our democracy, and we'll never realize our country again. And, it's all going to go down the gutter. And then on Trump's side, I'm sure they're like, hey, these are communist, crazy, whack jobs. They're going to just open up every border, and it's a free for all, and we're going to print money nonstop. So, again, is there truth to, some of that? I'm sure, obviously, but that's why it works, is because, yeah, you could take some truth and then a lot of untruth and then sprinkle it together, put an ad for 15 seconds in front of someone, and then they get a reaction, right? And so that is something that I really try and stay away from. It's something you have to be aware of, right? Like if you want to stay in a state of high blood pressure and constantly thinking about politics, that's your prerogative. It's not mine. I really do try to keep calm, keep cool. And so I'll listen here and there to, some political takes or whatever as it gets closer to the election. But man, I can't wait for it to be over. And the funny thing is the next, November 5th will roll around. And after all that chaos and money that went down the drain in ads and all that stuff, it's still pretty much the same old everyday thing that you experienced the day before, right? Like there's not a big difference. I think that people thought when Trump got into office that there would have been this monumental explosion or something, and all of a sudden, the White House will be overtaken or something. But then it didn't happen. Same thing happened when, each president comes in. So it's just, politics are ugly. It's the worst part of humanity, right? So I think that feelings unbridled and unchecked are dangerous. And then in business, so this is mainly focused on business, right? It really can get in the way. And so I'm going to give you guys just a couple examples of how feelings have gotten in the way of the greater good, and, how that can really impact, business deals from actually happening even. And so it's interesting because I'm going to give you just a couple examples of how this has played out over the last month or two. So, okay, first story. I purchased this office about 3 years ago that I'm doing this podcast out of. The way that I was able to purchase the office is an interesting story. So just to give you a quick rundown of the story behind it. There's a realtor representing the seller, right? So I've been a realtor in Arizona for about 14, 15 years, right? So I'm no longer a realtor and could not be happier about that. But it was great. There's a lot of things I enjoyed about having my license and being a realtor. But I will say that the more that I work with realtors, the more volume that I do, it just becomes apparent that it can be the rap that they get. Let's just put it this way: the rap that they get from a lot of people, in that they don't deserve what they make, and they honestly are a hindrance a lot of times, is warranted. in a lot of situations. But just like anything, you're going to have about 10%, maybe less, to be honest, probably less, of the amount of realtors out there that actually deserve, to get the checks that they get. And they actually do work well on the behalf of the buyer or the seller. And so, okay, like I'm just going to throw it out there. I work all the time with realtors, but I'm very picky. And I know there's a lot of, just like any industry, right? There's bad doctors, there's bad mechanics, there's bad, you name it. So we get it, right? Like there's good and bad in every industry. So we first went through the realtor and said, okay, we're interested. We'll make an offer. That offer was rejected. And so they wanted more money for it, right? So we couldn't afford it at that time. And so we tried to negotiate back and forth. And when it came down to it, I just said, look, this isn't going to make sense for us. It's not going to make sense for them. And so, but I wanted the office. I really wanted to figure out a solution. And so I went to the agent and I said, okay, would he ever consider doing a lease purchase where I could lease the building for a little bit and then eventually, purchase it from him down the road, maybe a year down the road? He said, absolutely not. Wouldn't even consider it, not a chance. And I knew he didn't even make a phone call. He didn't ask him, this was just him wanting a commission. And that's the other thing I could pick up on really quickly. If an agent is actually working for a commission check or if they're actually working for the best interest of their client. And unfortunately, a lot of times it ends up being, where they got the commission breath, right? So in this situation, I knew that he wasn't even presenting that to the seller. And so I wasn't sure if the seller would entertain it or not. I really had no idea. But, I tried asking him a couple of different ways. Can we try some creative financing deals? No. So a couple months goes by. I'm in Arizona. I fly back out to Chattanooga and I decide, you know what? I'm going to try a different tact. I'm going to figure out who owns the building. I'm going to go to his office or his house and I'm just going to talk to him and just ask him, point blank, hey, can we work something out? So that's what I did. I got his information, found out he's an attorney in Cleveland. And there's a Cleveland, Tennessee, by the way, not Ohio. So went up to his office, could not be nicer, great guy. And I said, hey, here's my situation, right? Like I would love to purchase it. It's going to be a little bit difficult to get a loan. It's a commercial loan. This was 2022 or 2021. I can't remember. Isn't that? And so there was some transitioning happening with my job in Arizona. And so anyways, I was like, I don't even know how I'm going to get a loan, how it's going to work out. Cause I'm a, business owner. And so taxes are always weird and all that fun stuff. So I told him my situation. I said, look, would it work out for you if we structured it in this way where, I did a lease purchase and here's, what I'm thinking. And the guy, funny enough, was like, yeah, I'll do that deal. Makes perfect sense. And then I said, well, look, I would need you to, carry a portion of it because I don't have $100,000 to put down today. But, if you'd be willing to carry that and put a note on that at, 6% interest, let's say, would that work for you? He said, yeah, that'd be great. I've got, I bought it for a great price. He owned it free and clear. So it didn't bother him at all. So it worked out. And he said, you know what? I'll get my assistant in here. We'll write this up. And it honestly took us on the negotiation contract side of things. I think it took us a total of about 10 minutes. We had it worked out, ironed out, good to go, signed it. And we went on our merry way. Well, funny enough, the, of course, agent, gets involved and the seller, I asked him, I said, look, do you plan on paying him a commission? He's like, oh, I've worked with this guy for a long time. I think he'll be okay with me not, getting the full commission because he didn't do anything. In fact, he was just a hindrance because he didn't even present any of this to me. And this would have been done months ago. And I've just been sitting on an empty building. So he didn't feel like, he should pay him the full 3% or whatever the amount was. And so I said, well, that's between you guys. Obviously, you work it out. And he called me up and was just livid, so mad. And he was like, I cannot believe it. But I've given this guy deal after deal after deal. And on this one, he is standing firm on making his full commission on it, even though, again, he had nothing to do with this even working. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pay him and we will never do business again. So I looked at that and I was like, man, that agent, short-sighted and let feelings get in the way, right? His pride, his ego, his feelings, just because he couldn't make the deal work. And he stuck to this whole, hey, we signed an agreement contract. So I can see both sides. I get where the agent's coming from, but man, it was really unfortunate for him to not be able to see the bigger picture. So he sacrificed probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in commissions down the road in exchange for what amounted to be about $15,000. So that was one experience where I was like, man, talk about facts over feelings, right? The feelings just, took the front seat and the drive, the steering wheel, and unfortunately didn't work out. Then I had recently another situation where we were trying to get into a group to offer our property management services, and they had a leadership team that got together, and it was a bunch of realtors that got together and said, hey, is this a good company to work with on their merits? So instead of it being a conversation about, the actual property management company and what they did, there were a couple feelings shared about, I felt I should have gotten this or that. And, there were a lot of feelings, to save everyone the details and all that stuff. But yeah, funny enough, they let their feelings get in the way. There was no, business or logic behind it. It was strictly just feelings. And so a decision was made again in that situation based off of feelings versus, the actual merit of, is this a good property management company to work with? That conversation never was had because there were just too many emotions involved, right? And so it happens to all of us, right? So those are just a couple that recently happened, but I look at my life and I think about, the times that I regret things that were said. It are those times where I just let my emotions get in front of me. And so with business, I think it's important to have emotion. Have you ever talked to a salesperson that has zero emotion? Like, it's the worst experience ever, right? Because it's just, you're like, do you even want this to happen? Like, do you have a pulse still? Like, we know what that's like, right? So I do feel like it's important to have emotion and feelings involved. But again, if your feelings are in the driver's seat, it's going to be a rough life for you, right? Because I think we're always teaching our kids. We have 5 kids, and we're always, I feel like, constantly having to help them with their temper, tantrums that they have every couple of minutes. It seems like there's one that's spouting off and just, full blown tears and crying and mad and screaming and punching and, all these things that go in. So you see it as a kid and you try and work that out of them as a parent until hopefully they get to a point where by the time they're leaving the house, they've figured out how to control those emotions. And then they've realized, oh, okay, I'm feeling this way right now. It won't be forever. It's temporary. Let me figure out what I can do to calm down and think logically, right? So again, facts over feelings. That's a big one. And just a couple of quotes that I came across that stood out to me were Robert Frost said, education is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or your self-confidence. And so, yeah, that goes to, I think a lot of people are like, hey, it doesn't matter to me one way or the other, or I don't, my feelings are never hurt. You can tell me whatever. I think there's some lying involved anytime someone says that, because I think all of us care, obviously, to an extent. But I love what he said there, that, really at the core, education is having the ability to just listen to all sides, right? And then, not losing your temper or self-confidence in the process. Oscar Wilde said, I don't want to be at the mercy of my emotions. I want to use them, to enjoy them, and to dominate them. Love that one, especially at the end. That really is at the crux what it comes down to as humans. I feel like what separates us, what makes us different from the other animals in the animal kingdom is our emotion. So again, I think that it's a God-given thing. Like it's a blessing to have, but it is something that you have to learn to bridle and dominate. So my goal is to dominate my emotions. Not saying I'm the best at it, but it is a goal that, every day you just kind of work towards it, at being a little bit better at listening, understanding, taking your time, right? So love that one as well. So yeah, the last quote was Chris Voss. He was an FBI negotiator for hostages, right? So he was the lead guy for a long time. Wrote a couple books. Never Split the Difference was one of them that really enjoyed and recommend that one. But he said that empathy does not equal agreement. So, and this is really important in this political environment too, right? I think it's so important that we have empathy for people that are going through struggles, whatever that may be. but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to agree with it, right? Like, but you need to still have that empathy so that you can put yourself in their shoes, understand where they're coming from, but you may draw a different conclusion, and that's okay. That's where we need to be better as a society at just saying, look, I don't agree with what you're saying, but I do understand where you're coming from, and that's okay, right? Hopefully, we can get better at doing that in politics. That would be awesome. So, that also kind of leads me to, there really are, when it comes down to sales, like I've been in sales really my whole life, like my whole career, I would say. So always been in sales. And I think that there's three different type of salespeople, right? So the first one is emotional based, right? Where they just kind of appeal to your emotions and they get really into like, how does this make you feel? Or, can you imagine? And, they really play up to the emotional side of things. And it works sometimes, right? Like it's effective strategy, clearly. The second type are the persistent type. The ones that are like, I'm not taking no for an answer. I'm going to sit here until you sign this document. And if it takes 50 no's to get to the yes, I'm going to be here and I'm just going to push through, right? So you get the persistent people. It does work on some people, clearly, but obviously a lot of people rub them the wrong way, like myself, and does the opposite. The third is logical, where, look, if this makes sense, great. If it doesn't, great. Either way, it's fine. I want what's best for you. Let's just figure out a solution here, one way or the other, whether it's with me or someone else. Let me make sure to help you to solve your problem, right? So clearly, the logical sale right there that I just explained is the direction that we should be going, with sales, and hopefully everyone ends up there. And it was interesting as I thought through this, I was like, you know what? My journey really was 1, 2, 3. It started emotional. I thought that would be the best way to go at people, is just like appeal to their emotions and play that up. And I would get really into their feelings and ask those feeling questions. And then I eventually, got that taught out of me when I got into door-to-door sales. And that was hard. That was a massive struggle of mine, right? Like going door-to-door sales, selling alarm systems was hard because it went against my nature completely. Like it was like, you got to get out of that car. They drop you off. You get in a van, first of all, with 5 other guys or whatever. They drop you off at this location on the corner of a street or whatever and say, okay, here's the map. Here's your streets you got to knock. Good luck. We'll pick you up when the sun goes down. That was essentially what I was, doing and I did that for 3 years. So I would go and I would knock door to door, and then, they would tell you, be persistent, put your foot in the door so they can't shut it, find a way to just assume the sale, walk in the home, get their social security numbers, run their credit, you name it. It was just like, whatever it takes, you got to get that sale and they got to sign today. And we are installing it within an hour after you ink it. It's a whole operation, right? Like it was intense. And so that I hated it, but it worked. It paid for college, but man, I hated I truly hate, that was the one time where I hated what I did, like just despised it. It was the worst job ever. But again, it was hard to find in college a job that you could work for the summer and it would pay for the year, right? So that was a sacrifice. But then it took me a while, I don't know how many years, and I'm still working on this obviously, but I can absolutely say at this point in my career, in my life, whenever people call now and they're interested in real estate and they want, to potentially invest with us with our turnkey real estate properties, it's so nice to be in a position of just being completely comfortable in what I do and what I'm selling. And I have full faith and trust in what I sell. And that's another big component. Like I know without a shadow of a doubt that the properties that we sell are better than anyone else in the industry, bar none. Like it just is, that I know of. I'm sure there might be other ones out there that I'm not aware of. But if you're talking about single family turnkey properties that are managed by an incredible property management company, we are second to none. And I can for sure say that within our location. Again, I can't speak for the nation, but where I'm at, that's how I feel, right? When you have that confidence and you believe in your product, then it's just a logical sale. Then it just comes down to, look, tell me about your situation. Where are you at? Okay, here's what we can offer you. This may make sense. It may not. And if it doesn't, I will be the first to tell you that you probably shouldn't do it. And I'm more than happy to do that, because you know what? If it doesn't work for you, there's 20 other people coming in right behind you that will be more than happy to take on this property, because they're in such high demand and so hard to find. And it takes so much work to even get one of these, that I can assure you I am completely comfortable with you saying no. And it's great too, because I don't have to haggle on prices. It just, the price is the price. Does it make sense? If not, that's okay. That is our business. We're very confident in what we do. And it took 15 years to get to this point in my career where I feel comfortable enough to be in that situation where you just don't care either way. If they want to do it, great. If they don't, great. It really doesn't bother me either way, because we're confident that it will sell and we'll be just fine. And so it's so exciting, and I don't take that for granted. I'm very appreciative of the situation that we find ourselves in right now. And then there was a lot of failure to get there. But that's what I've, told everyone is, look, I'm going to work on doing all the failing on my own stuff, on my dime, right? Before I bring in anyone else, I want to make sure that I make as many mistakes as I possibly can, so I can make this thing as bulletproof as possible. It's not perfect, but it is pretty darn bulletproof. Like, there's a lot of things that I've gone through that each time I make a mistake or a failure, I'm like, okay, next time we're changing that. Next time, changing that. Next time, this is going to be better. This is going to be tweaked. This is going to be improved. So as we've been doing that, over the years, it really has gotten to that point where we're at where we are today. But the exciting part of it is I know that we can still improve. We can still get so much better at it. And so it's fun to be in that position where you can sell logically and not have to rely on sales gimmicks and all that stuff and deal with buyer remorse from people after they purchase it's so funny, because I think back on my days of knocking door to door, and I'm sure these people did not wake up expecting to go on a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract to put a new alarm system in their house that was installed the same day that I was there, even if it's 10 o'clock at night. There's installers at their home, putting it in for them so that they can't back out. And it's just crazy to look back on that and be like, man, I'm sure there's a lot of people that had some buyer remorse. But that's not the case with turnkey real estate. It's just, it's in a good position right now. Okay. So that was the other thought that I had. Okay. So let's transition from facts over feelings and, logic-based selling to value. This is another thing I'm really, really passionate about. And the article that I'm actually working on that will go out next week is on this topic, right? Okay. So MVP. What is value? What is a valuable player? So most valuable player in sports, let's just take basketball, NBA, for example. They give out this award, and every year there's always a debate on who should get it, who's deserving of it. Some years it's easier than others. It's pretty apparent. Like Steph Curry was the only one to ever have a unanimous MVP selection, where everyone was like, look, clearly he changed the entire game of basketball. He deserves to be the MVP. So right now, that player is Nikola Jokic, which I love because I'm a big Denver Nuggets fan from Colorado. So it's fun to see them relevant and good again. So even get a championship in there. But it's interesting because when you talk about value, everyone differs on what they feel is valuable. So usually what happens is that award goes to whoever has the best stats, right? So everyone was dogging on like Russell Westbrook because he would have great stats, triple-double, which used to be really hard to get. Seems like it's easier these days, where you have double-digit numbers for rebounds, assists, blocks, points, whatever. And so 3 of those categories, you have double digits, right? So that's a triple-double. So Russell Westbrook, everyone was like, look, they just gave it to him because he had a good season and really good stats, but his team got knocked out of the playoffs in the first round. You take Joel Embiid. He is another one that, everyone says, oh yeah, he should, be the MVP. But then it's funny because he gets into the playoffs and he disappears. Like, great regular season player, lots of, padded numbers and statistics, but, is he really valuable in the sense that like his team is going to be incredibly bad if he's not on the court? And it's interesting because when he was hurt, because he gets hurt a lot of times his team actually does better without him. So that I think shows you, okay, like is he really valuable? So the best example when you take basketball, the NBA, is Jokic, right? And here's why, because they have different statistics and metrics to see, if someone really is valuable and needed on their team and like how important they are to the team success. Just to give you this is the perfect example. So there's a plus minus statistic, right? So it's like, hey, does a team have positive points when he's playing or negative when he's playing? And so his plus minus is the highest in the NBA by far. I think it was, 21.5. So they're 21.5 points better with him on the court versus him off the court. That is a crazy statistic. Take the Olympics, though. He played for Serbia against the U.S. When he was on the court playing against the U.S., Serbia was tied. It was a even game across the board. However, when he sat, they lost by 26 points whenever he would sit. They just could not do a thing without him on the court. So that tells you right there, okay, clearly he was incredibly valuable. He has the highest efficiency rating for the playoffs and regular season. Regular season, it's at 32, and playoffs, it's at 27. And that goes again to his efficiency, like his shooting percentages, his free throws, his 3-point, everything is just off the chart, right? If he takes a shot, there is an incredibly high likelihood of it going in, and he always makes the right decision, whether it's to shoot, pass, dribble, whatever. So that is a valuable person, right? So when we think about value, this goes to the millennials, all the younger kids that are, now getting into the workforce. I'm a big proponent and fan of being able to move around, right? Like from job to job. I think it's crazy if you were someone that just stayed at a job for 50 years, right? And never left, because I think that people that do that are incredible. First of all, kudos, that takes a lot of discipline and patience, and, that's incredible, right? There's a part of me that has respect for that. But then there's also kind of man, were you just afraid to kind of go out there on your own and make it rain, make it happen? I'm not a fan of W-2. I'm not a fan of the paycheck. I don't love the 40-hour work week. I hate it because it goes against my nature. I believe truly that you should eat what you kill, that you should go out there and hunt, but again, I also understand I'm different. There are visionaries, there's implementers. I am a visionary 1000%, not the best implementer, but I'm pretty good at finding the people and the team to put together so that we can implement what the vision, that I have for the company. So I understand that you have to have both. What I would tell anyone that's getting into the workforce right now, and they're just starting off, we're hiring a new girl actually that's younger. She just graduated college about a year or two ago. She's coming in, she's fresh, young, happy. I'm very excited, to have her come on the team, because, and people always ask well, what about my experience? I don't have experience in real estate. I always tell them, I don't care. Experience means nothing to me. I care about character. I care about who you are at your core. What are you going to be like? What's your motor like? How much energy will you bring to the table? What's that look like? Are you positive? Are you negative? Those are the components. And I do some personality tests and stuff as well along with it. But that's the part that I want to know is what type of person are you? But outside of that, what I would say as my biggest piece of advice that I give to anyone that asks, hey, I'm starting this new job, do you have any advice for me? I will tell you that the best piece of advice would be to bring value. And I don't care what that looks like, just bring value, right? So what does that mean? What if you showed up and, they tell you, okay, here's your task. Here's the job we want you to do. You start off doing that, but maybe you pick up on, man, they seem really stressed and overwhelmed with, in our industry right now, it's project management. We've got 20 projects going on right now. I wonder if I could help out that person and, bring value to them by alleviating, this off of their plate. Maybe I can help them out with a few phone calls, or maybe I can, help out my boss. I see a need over here, and I'm just going to be proactive, and I'm going to see if I can bring value there. Or, and that's of course, in addition to let's say you're a salesperson, you just got hired on. They tell you what the quota is, what they expect you to do. Well, what if I go 10% more than that, 20% more than that? What if they tell me to make 50 calls? I make 75 calls every day. What if they tell me it's Monday through Friday, Saturdays are optional? What if for the first couple of months I work every single Saturday, right? And I put in more work and effort into what I'm doing, and I exceed expectations. And not only that, but I'm truly just bringing value to the point where it's kind of hard not to notice. It's gotten to the point where the boss is starting to realize, like, hey, whoever that person is, whatever's going on over here, it's working. Like, keep that going. Who is this person, right? They want to ask that question. So by bringing value, I mean, and you can establish it very quickly. You have to figure out what the needs are and then just be proactive enough to insert yourself and to do that. And it's the same thing whenever you start a new business. So like when we started out here in Chattanooga, like I think the number one focus that I have with, let's say, property management is, how can we go above and beyond? Like, what are some ways that we can help serve, that of course we're not getting compensated for, but we want to go that little extra mile. Maybe I give them a little, gift basket, for becoming a client of ours. Maybe I, send them a thank you card. Maybe I, walk the property for them and take a video just to show them the progress of that property, just so that they're in the loop. These are all things that are not necessary. I don't have to do it, but I want to take that little extra step and do that for them. Like, those things get noticed, and it just accelerates, how quickly you can grow by doing those little things. So that would be my advice, to anyone that is just starting off in a job or that wants to grow their business, right? So if you're growing your business, you either got time or you got money. And so, if you've got time, well, great. Now you're going to, make sure to make those extra phone calls, to go the extra mile or whatever, and so in the beginning, usually that's all that you do have, though, is that time and energy. And so, you got to leverage that. So anyways, that was another thought that I've had, is just like, hey, value. Like, can we bring value? How can we bring value? And if you just consistently provide that, it's impossible not to succeed. So yeah, this is the last thought that I had that I wanted to go over. And this goes to growth as well on the business side of things. So Cody Sanchez, if you don't listen to her, she's she's, I guess you would call her an influencer on social media, someone I started following about 2 years ago. She buys businesses, right? So, and then does training courses on how to go about that. So she recently posted something. She said, I have the richest mentor of hers that has given her the best advice and is also incredibly wealthy and successful. He once told her that the reason that he wins more than his competition is because he moves fast. By the time most people are done analyzing, he's already made 3 mistakes and found a better way. So that obviously resonated with me. Again, the whole purpose of this show is the rush to fail, where it's like, and then you know what, when we look at our business right now, we currently have 20 active projects going on where we are renovating and selling these, right? Now, do we have the manpower to do all those? Not right now. We are, constantly trying to keep our head above water, and we're treading and we're working as hard as we can. And we're getting better with every single property and doing, and all the accolades and appreciation and thanks goes to our project manager, Leslie, who is just perfect for the job. She does an amazing job. And so she's definitely had to learn on the fly. She started with talk about not having experience, 0 experience in project management. And now, she is, managing 20 projects at the same time, which in our area is, I think at this point, we're the largest, active home buyer in our area. Right. So again, not saying much. I'm not tooting our own horn or anything like that, but that's just where we find ourselves at right now. And it's interesting because I'll go to a lot of these events and I'll talk to people and they're like, hey, I haven't done my first deal yet. I'm still analyzing. I'm looking at the MLS. I'm trying to find the right deal. I don't want to make a mistake. So I'm just kind of like, I haven't pulled the trigger yet. And I'll talk to people that have done that for years, where they're just constantly looking. I'm like, man, can you imagine had you bought that rental property, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago? Like, can you imagine what it would be worth now? Can you imagine all the rent you would be taking in? But because they are just constantly so afraid of making these mistakes that they let these opportunities pass them because they're afraid and they don't want to make mistakes, right? So again, if you could just get that mentality out and just act and kind of work on things on the fly. Like, I know it can be nerve-wracking to a lot of people. And if you're one of those people that needs to analyze everything, then I would recommend that you work with someone or find someone that can help push you to make decisions quicker. Maybe you need a visionary and you're the implementer. I'm a big believer, that there's, probably someone out there that you can work with on partnering with. And we do deals all the time with people that we'll partner up with that bring us opportunities, and, we find ways to bring value to them. So yeah, like, I just think that there is beauty in jumping in and really just working as you go, trying to work things out and figure it out. And as we've done that, we've obviously gotten better throughout each project, and we have new systems and processes in place. And so it's like AI, right? Like, AI just needs information. So when you think about like all the Tesla cars on the road, each one of those is collecting data for Tesla so that they can then improve their systems and operations, because they're learning every single day. And now it's compounding. The more cars that get out there, the faster that program can learn and the better it becomes over time. And so that really is like the secret to our success. If there was a secret, it's not a secret. Honestly, I'm telling you right now, that's what it is we're just willing to, we have enough information that we can go off of, where I'm about 90% sure that, each property that we purchase is going to be obviously a net positive experience, and we're going to make money on it. We still have failures, and I'm okay with that. Anyone that tells me that they've never lost money in real estate, they've probably not done it long enough, or they're way too conservative and they have passed up a lot of deals. And I think they would tell you that. I don't think that they would have a hard time, admitting that, they probably could have made a lot more money had they been a little bit more aggressive, but they were too nervous to do that, right? For whatever reason. And so I'm just a big believer and proponent. Like, you get to a point where there's actually safety in volume. So it's the same thing with marketing. If you did one marketing campaign for postcards, and let's say you spent $10,000 on that and you didn't get a single deal, you would never do postcards again, right? Now, imagine if you did that, 3-4 times, right? That's a lot of risk. But let's say, hey, you've got, 3 or 4 times more postcards out there. The likelihood of getting, a couple people to reach out to you and respond, goes up from there. And then, all you need to do in real estate is close 1 or 2 of those. And, then you paid for that whole campaign plus some. And then it's interesting that as you consistently do that, month after month, as long as you're on the right path, with what you're doing, there's actually more safety in spending more money than there is scaling back and trying to be really conservative. And but there's obviously more to that. There's, and you got to obviously be on the right track. You can't just throw a dart and expect it to work. Like, obviously there's more to that. But I will say that with what we do, like, I know the areas enough, and I know our systems enough, I know our pricing enough, that I know that we can, with about 90% confidence, make a return on that investment. But again, I'm okay with if on 1 or 2 they lose, but 8 or 9 are, making money. I'll do that all day. Keep signing me up for more and more. And that's what we're doing. And, thankfully it's working. But to get to that point, obviously it's years and years and years of failures over and over again, but we're accelerating that at a pretty good pace, to get to that point. So on the flip side of that, I think everyone is like, man, you're all about go, 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 right? I also have to preach patience. And this is the hardest thing for me. And it's my biggest mistake that I've made in my career. People ask me, what would I do differently? It's definitely wish that I would have been more patient. I wish that I would have held on to more properties. So often you get excited in real estate with the opportunity to make a good return, let's say flipping a home. And there were so many times I've now sold hundreds and hundreds of homes that, had I held on to and been wise enough to at least keep 1 or 2 here and there every year, they would be worth 10 times more than what I've actually made on the deal. So I took a $20,000 profit, for example, in exchange for missing out on the opportunity to get all that rental income plus the equity and tax savings down the road, which would amount to probably hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars per property. So there's that quote that real estate is better bought and never sold. And that could not be more true, which is why we preach that to everyone that purchases real estate with us. Is they always ask us, what's the average hold time? How long should I hold the property? I tell them as long as you possibly can. You need to have discipline. You need to be able to hold on to properties as long as possible and just, keep them as those cash cows, especially if they're in great locations, great areas. They're not building any more land, right? Like what you see is what you get. And so when you invest in land and when you invest in real estate, which is on land, of course, like that dirt continually goes up in value because it's more and more scarce as more people are on the earth, as more homes are built and stuff. It becomes more and more scarce. So of course the value goes up. So supply and demand, which is why in real estate, if you can hold, the longer, the better. The other thing that is interesting is there's a quote out there that you can do. I think here it is. People overestimate what they can do in 1 year and they underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And so when you think about that, think about, this year, what your goals were at the beginning of the year. You probably have realized, man, that was a little too aggressive. I think I was a little too ambitious of what I was going to accomplish in that year. But then when I look back, 10 years and think about where I'm at now compared to that, I would be ecstatic, honestly, if I realized, man, in 10 years, you're going to be in this position. That's pretty cool. And I think what it comes down to is, again, just being patient and consistent. And there's amazing in that compounding effect, right? Where just like over time, you just get better and better at what you do. So if you stick with your craft, it's only going to benefit you. And I think about with businesses, they said that 25% fail in the first year and then 50% in 5 years are gone. They close their doors. On average, profitability takes 4 years for business to, become profitable. And then it takes 7 to 10 years before they are consistently profitable. So that just goes to say, like, if you are someone that wants to bounce around from job to job to job, you can absolutely do that. Just keep in mind that each time you do that, you're rewinding the clock on how long it's going to take you to get, to that point where you're consistently profitable, if you're especially like a business owner. So what I struggle with in the beginning of my career was just wanting to do everything and getting my hands involved in all these little projects, right? All these different businesses. And then you realize that you're not getting ahead doing that. All that you're doing is just prolonging the time it's going to take you. If you wanted to just be consistent with one or two things, it just prolonged that process. And so again, this took a lot of time to figure out, and I had to do it the hard way. You have to learn the hard way a lot of times. And that's where we're at now, is finally realizing, okay, like, we're good at real estate. We're good at buying single family properties, 1 to 4 units. We know how to fix them up. We know how to buy them right. We know how to sell them right. We know how to manage them right. So just lean into that. And that's what we're doing on a consistent basis, and really trying to put our blinders on and not focus on all these other things, so that hopefully, that consistency of profitability is not going to take 7 to 10 years. Hopefully, obviously at this point, it would take, a couple of years, ideally. So we're constantly working on it. And again, it's taken time to get to that point. But so I think, to wrap it up, one of the things that my dad instilled in me that I appreciate more than anything was the love of work. He was someone that would always preach that, you got to love what you do and you got to love work. And every Saturday he would wake up and, we would have to get out of bed at 6, 7 in the morning, and immediately he would put us to work pulling weeds or planning something. He always had some project, lined out for us. And so hated it growing up. But it's funny because he would work right alongside us. And the whole time he'd always be like, I love to work. You got to love to work. And I'm like, you're crazy. There's no way that that's even truthful. I thought he was full of it. I thought he was lying. But it's funny because as I've gotten older and, now I have kids and, I'm waking them up to come help me and do these chores on Saturdays. One of the things that's always in the back of my mind is, man, I'm so grateful that he taught me to love work and to love the process, love. And it's interesting because if you can get in that mindset of enjoying work and the hard things, then when you go to work, it's not work in the sense that you go there with a an attitude that, man, I got to stare at the clock until it hits 5 o'clock so I can get home, right? Like the mentality shifts completely to welcoming and enjoying the process. Like for me, it really is hard to go home because I want to just keep working, right? Like I have to tell myself to shut it off. Otherwise, I honestly would work every day, probably till midnight. Because it's just something that it's in my blood. I don't know how to explain it, but it's something that I enjoy doing. And so, yeah, if you fall in love with the process in life or work, you'll be happy. Work is no longer work. It's honestly fun. And so that's something that, again, it took me a long time to figure out, but my dad was onto something and I appreciate him instilling that in me. So yeah, those are all of the things going on in this noggin, all the things going on that, we've had the time to, I guess, reflect on and think about, and just wanted to share some of that on a podcast. I know it's been a long time since I did the last one. This is a solo podcast, but we've got an interview lined up for Friday, and then hoping to have a slate of guests, over the next, what do we got left in the year? 12 weeks? Is that right? 12 weeks, something like that, 12 to 15 weeks in that range. That's crazy. So do plan on having, one a week up until the end of the year and get back in the saddle. So anyways, made it all the way through. Appreciate listening to the podcast, and we will see you next time.
I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to this podcast. It's the best part of my week. I love learning from others' failures, and let's be honest, failures are way more enjoyable when you're not the one experiencing them in the moment. If you or someone you know has a story or experience to share, we would love to have you on the show. And please do not forget to like and share this podcast with anyone you feel would get value from the experiences shared on this show. Until the next show, remember to fail fast and fail often. Thanks for listening to the Rush to Fail podcast.